The beach house sat in quiet isolation, a perfect sanctuary far from the hustle of the world. Madeline gazed out of the window, her eyes tracing the rhythmic dance of the waves as they kissed the shore. The sea breeze, cool and soothing, tugged at the edges of the curtains, whispering secrets that only the ocean could understand. It had been a peaceful retreat, a place to escape the turmoil of recent months. Yet, even in this serene environment, a storm brewed within her. She had come here to find solace after everything with Emily, her daughter-in-law, began to feel wrong. What had started as a polite, cordial relationship had slowly transformed into something colder, more distant. The subtle jabs, the undermining comments, Madeline had noticed them all, but it wasn't until recently that the full scope of Emily's intentions became clear. The phone beside her bed buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She reached for it, her fingers brushing across the screen to see Tom's name. The security guard at her building. He never called unless it was important. Madeline, Tom's voice was tight, edged with something Madeline couldn't quite place. It's Emily. She's here with a few movers. She says she's the new owner and wants to take your furniture. The words hit Madeline like a sudden gust of wind, but she didn't feel panic. She didn't feel surprised either. What she felt was something strange, something she hadn't felt in years. Satisfaction. Madeline leaned back against the headboard, a slow smile creeping onto her lips. So it begins. She had known something like this would happen. Emily had been pushing for months, subtly maneuvering herself into Madeline's life, and now she was trying to take everything Madeline had worked for. But Madeline was ready. She had prepared for this. Don't stop her, Tom, Madeline said, her voice calm, even serene. Let her in, but make sure she signs the log with her full name and ID. There was a long pause on the other end. Tom hesitated, confused. Are you sure, Miss Madeline? Completely sure, Madeline replied, her gaze shifting back to the ocean. She could already see it, the unfolding drama, the trap Emily had unknowingly walked right into. Let her pass. She's going to find a surprise. With a soft click, Madeline ended the call and set the phone down. She opened the security app on her phone, her thumb gliding over the screen. The cameras she had installed 3 weeks ago were hidden so well that not even Emily knew they were there. Madeline watched as Emily and the movers entered the building, watched as they made their way up to her apartment. Let her think she's won, Madeline thought, but she has no idea what she's walking into. She didn't need to rush. Not yet. Emily was about to learn that Madeline had been one step ahead all along. This wasn't just about furniture or ownership. No, this was something much more personal. And Madeline was ready to confront the woman who had tried to take everything from her. Madeline's fingers hovered over the app's icons as she watched Emily make her way to the apartment. The calm of the beach house, the gentle sound of the waves, felt like a contrast to the storm brewing inside her. It was a battle of wills, and for the first time in months, Madeline felt fully in control. The tension between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was palpable, but it was more than that. Emily had underestimated Madeline, and Madeline was about to show her exactly how wrong she had been. Madeline sat at the edge of her bed, her phone gripped tightly in her hands. She could see everything as clear as day, through the security cameras installed in every corner of her apartment. The live feed on her phone displayed Emily stepping through the door, flanked by the two movers. The unmistakable tension in the air rippled through the screen, even though Madeline remained perfectly still in her beach house sanctuary, miles away. The movers, towering men in their worn company uniforms, looked out of place in the pristine lobby of the building. But it wasn't them that held Madeline's attention. It was Emily, her daughter-in-law, walking confidently into the apartment as if she belonged there. Her face was hard to read, determined, yes, but there was something else in her eyes, too. The edge of impatience, perhaps, a hurriedness. Madeline's heart sank, but she kept her composure. I should have known, she thought, her mind flickering back to the days leading up to this moment. The subtle manipulation. The moments when Emily had tried so hard to be sweet, to act like the perfect daughter-in-law. But Madeline had seen through it. Now everything was coming to light. Madeline's fingers hovered over the phone's screen. She watched Emily, her back straight, striding into the living room. She moved with purpose, glancing at the furniture, her eyes narrowing as if assessing each item's worth. One of the movers rolled in a dolly stacked with a small mountain of Madeline's belongings. They set down the heavy load with a thud. "Let's start with that sofa," Emily instructed. Her voice carried an edge that Madeline didn't miss. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was an order. Madeline's jaw tightened as she heard Emily's words. My sofa. The one she had chosen herself, the one she had sunk hours of searching into, the one that had seen so many good memories shared with her late husband. And now, here was Emily, treating it like an object to be moved, packed away, sold. The movers began to wrap the sofa in protective material. Emily moved on, her eyes scanning the room, as if appraising her new property. She stepped over to the coffee table, her fingers trailing along its surface, and then to the sideboard where Madeline had kept her most cherished mementos. "Careful with the vases," Emily said, her tone sharp. "Those are expensive." The way she spoke, so casually as if she were in charge, made Madeline's blood boil. This wasn't just about furniture anymore. This was about control. Emily had crossed a line, thinking she could take what didn't belong to her. Madeline's mind raced. I should have been more prepared for this, she thought, though part of her knew she had been preparing all along in ways that Emily never suspected. The cameras, the hidden recordings, everything was in place for this moment, and she wasn't going to let Emily win. She shifted her focus back to the live feed. Emily was already in the bedroom, opening the closet. Madeline could almost hear the click of the hangers as Emily rifled through her clothes. She could see Emily's eyes light up, greed dancing behind her gaze as she scanned her wardrobe, pulling things out one by one. Madeline knew what was coming next, the jewelry box. Sure enough, Emily's hand moved toward the delicate box that contained pieces of her past, gifts from her late husband. The rings, the earrings, the necklaces, all treasures she had kept close. Not just for their value, but for the memories they carried. Madeline's heart tightened as she saw Emily pull out the anniversary necklace, the one her husband had given her on their 20th year together. Emily's fingers brushed over it, her expression unreadable, before she slipped it into her pocket with an unsettling confidence. "Everything that's worth anything," Emily muttered under her breath. It was a statement, not a question. Madeline's fists clenched. "I worked my entire life for this, and now she thinks she can just take it?" The betrayal stung, but Madeline kept her emotions in check. She had to remain calm. She had to stay in control. The feed switched to another camera. Emily had returned to the living room, checking through the drawers of Madeline's sideboard. The movers were busy loading things into the truck, their steps heavy and purposeful, but Emily was examining every single thing. Nothing was left to chance. Not a single possession was overlooked. Madeline's thoughts flashed back to the time when she had meticulously arranged everything, each item carefully placed where it had meaning. It wasn't about the value of things, it was about the life they represented. But here was Emily taking it all, and there was nothing Madeline could do, not yet. The time for confrontation wasn't now. The time for evidence, hard, irrefutable proof, was. Madeline tapped the phone screen and switched to another feed. She could see Emily's face on the live stream, a hint of satisfaction playing across her features. She was getting what she wanted, and she was blind to the fact that Madeline was already one step ahead. Madeline's breathing slowed, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and anticipation. She knew Emily wouldn't expect what was coming next. Madeline had been planning for months. She had already put in place the legal groundwork, and now, with each move Emily made, with each piece of furniture she tried to take, Madeline's case was growing stronger. As Emily finished inspecting the apartment, Madeline allowed herself a moment of clarity. She thinks she's in control, but she's not. Madeline's gaze remained fixed on her phone screen as the scene unfolded before her. The movers continued their work in silence, but Emily's voice cut through the quiet like a blade, sharp and determined. Madeline felt her grip tighten on the phone, the tension in the air palpable as Emily spoke to the men, directing them with a level of authority that Madeline had never granted her. "Be careful with that one," Emily instructed, her voice low but insistent as she pointed toward the antique vase on the mantel. "It's fragile. The last thing I need is for something to get damaged." Madeline's jaw tightened. The vase, she thought bitterly. It's not just fragile. It's a reminder of years of memories, of a life built with love and care. And now she's treating it like a mere object to be carted away. She kept watching as Emily moved with purpose, casually glancing around the room, as if evaluating her new domain. Her eyes flicked over the furniture, the decorations, the very things Madeline had filled her life with, and the underlying sense of entitlement was unmistakable. Emily acted like everything in this apartment, everything Madeline had worked so hard to achieve, now belonged to her. The words that followed from Emily's lips struck a chord deep within Madeline. "This all belongs to me now," Emily said to one of the movers as they started loading the sofa into the truck. "My mother-in-law is old. She won't be able to keep all this. It's better if it's with me." Madeline's heart clenched, the familiar ache of betrayal bubbling to the surface. Emily's dismissive tone, the casual way she spoke of her mother-in-law, the woman who had raised her son, was like a slap across the face. To hear Emily talk about her as if she were nothing but an old woman who no longer mattered, it cut deeper than Madeline cared to admit. But Madeline remained still, calm. Her mind was clear, focused. She had expected this. She had known, deep down, that Emily was capable of this kind of manipulation, that she was slowly and quietly trying to take everything Madeline had built. The movers moved the sofa to the door, their heavy footsteps echoing through the apartment. Emily followed them, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floors. "Make sure everything gets to the truck," she instructed one of the men. "And make sure you get everything on the list. There are more things I need." Madeline could feel the bile rise in her throat as she watched. More things, she thought, as if this were all just property to her, as if none of it mattered. Emily's actions were nothing short of a power play, a calculated move to strip Madeline of her independence and her life's work. Madeline's finger hovered over the screen, zooming in on the live footage of Emily's face. Emily was checking the drawers now, rifling through them like she had every right to. Madeline could almost hear her dismissive mutterings under her breath. "Just paperwork," Emily said, sounding bored as she sifted through papers. "She's going to need to get everything in order soon. I'll take care of it." Madeline's chest tightened. She doesn't even respect me enough to take care of this with honesty, Madeline thought. She's going to take everything I've worked for and act like it's nothing. Emily's next words confirmed what Madeline had already suspected. "She'll be fine. She won't even know the difference once we get everything in our names. She's too old to handle it all. The apartment, the beach house, they're mine now. Everything's in place." Madeline's breath hitched, a wave of cold fury washing over her. Mine now. The audacity. Emily was not only taking Madeline's possessions, but she was also dismissing her existence, her rights, and her autonomy. It was a betrayal wrapped in a guise of care, a manipulation that Madeline could no longer ignore. The next moment, Emily moved toward Madeline's bedroom, opening the closet and rummaging through the shelves. Madeline's eyes narrowed. She knew exactly what Emily was after. The jewelry box. The precious heirlooms. Those items weren't just valuable. They were symbols of a life lived, of memories too precious to be discarded by someone like Emily. Madeline's pulse quickened as she watched Emily lift a necklace from the box, holding it up to the light. It was the necklace her late husband had given her for their 20th wedding anniversary, a piece she had worn for years, through good times and bad. Emily smiled, as if the discovery of this trinket were a victory, and slipped it into her pocket without hesitation. The cold anger Madeline had been suppressing now flared into something fiercer. She had seen enough. This wasn't just a simple act of taking. This was a calculated, ruthless plan to erase Madeline from her own life, to strip her of her independence and force her into submission. Emily was trying to rob her, not just of her things, but of her dignity. Madeline sat back on the bed, still, her hands gripping the phone tightly. She thinks she's winning, Madeline thought, her lips curling into a quiet smile. But she has no idea what's coming next. Her voice was steady when she whispered to herself, "I'll make sure she doesn't get away with this." Madeline's mind raced, piecing together everything she had learned over the last few months. The subtle manipulation, the poisoning attempts, the calculated moves. But this time, Emily had made a mistake. She had underestimated Madeline, and Madeline was going to use every bit of evidence she had gathered to expose her. As Emily moved around the apartment, ignoring the fact that Madeline was watching, Madeline's determination grew. This was not just about furniture. This was about control. And Madeline wasn't about to let Emily take what was rightfully hers without a fight. Madeline tapped a few icons on her phone, activating the next phase of her plan. She was ready to confront Emily with the truth, and she knew in that moment that the tables were about to turn. The breeze from the ocean still drifted gently through the windows of Madeline's beach house, but inside, her mind was far from peaceful. As she sat on the edge of the bed, her thoughts spiraled back to those afternoons spent in Emily's company, each one leaving her feeling worse than the last. It wasn't the conversations or the polite smiles. No, it was something far more sinister. It was the tea. Madeline had never thought much of it at first. Emily, with her endless charm and effusive care, had insisted on making her a special herbal brew every time Madeline visited. "It's great for your circulation," Emily had said with a smile, "and it'll help you sleep better, I promise." At first, Madeline had been flattered by Emily's attentions, so she drank the tea, as she had always done with any offer of kindness. But over time, things began to change. It started with a slight dizziness, a light-headed feeling, barely noticeable at first, but it grew stronger after every cup of tea. Madeline would find herself feeling off balance, her thoughts muddled and slow. There was nausea, too, a faint, persistent unease that followed her long after she left Emily's apartment. The worst part, she could never quite pinpoint what caused it, but she began to associate it with the tea. A sinking feeling took root in her chest each time she drank it, and the strange, bitter aftertaste stayed with her longer than it should have. She started refusing the tea politely, but Emily would always insist, pressing it on her with a warmth that made Madeline feel guilty for saying no. "It's really good for you, Madeline," Emily would coo, her voice syrupy sweet, as if she knew exactly how to get Madeline to comply. The worst part was how subtle it all seemed. It wasn't enough for Madeline to outright accuse Emily. It wasn't a sudden slap of realization. No, it was more like the slow, creeping effect of a shadow on a bright day, hard to see at first but inescapable once it had covered everything. But then came the tipping point. One afternoon, after drinking the tea at Emily's apartment, Madeline had gone home, intending to relax. But as she sat on her couch, her vision blurred, the world spinning around her. Her stomach churned in a way it never had before. It felt like the tea was working its way through her body, making her weak, making her forgetful. She never felt anything like it. It was as if her mind were slipping away bit by bit. This isn't normal, Madeline had thought, the words racing through her head as the room seemed to tilt. This is something more. The next few days were a haze. Madeline, normally sharp and decisive, found herself struggling to concentrate on the simplest tasks. She mislaid her keys, forgotten appointments, and found herself staring blankly at the clock, wondering how much time had passed. But it wasn't until she had to cancel another dinner with her longtime friend, Sophia, that she realized how bad it had gotten. Sophia had asked her if she'd been feeling okay. "You don't seem like yourself lately," she'd remarked, concern evident in her voice. Madeline had forced a smile and brushed it off, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. "Something is wrong with me, and I know exactly who is behind it." That's when Madeline made the decision to seek help. After weeks of feeling disoriented and unsettled, she knew she couldn't let it go any longer. Her mind flashed back to the night she had overheard Emily talking to someone on the phone, her words cold and calculating. The tea thing didn't work, Emily had said. That was when it clicked. She had been drugging her, intentionally trying to destabilize her so that Madeline would become weak, confused, vulnerable. Emily wanted her to seem incapable, to give her an excuse to take what wasn't hers. Madeline couldn't let this go unchallenged. She called Jenna Scott, her lawyer and friend, the one person she knew she could trust. Jenna had been with her through the hardest parts of her life, and she was the only one who could help her now. When Madeline arrived at Jenna's office, she felt a strange mix of dread and relief. Jenna's office was quiet, serene, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Jenna looked up from her desk, her eyes sharp and kind as always. "Madeline," she said, standing to greet her. "You look like you've been through the ringer. What's going on?" Madeline sat down, taking a deep breath. "It's Emily," she began, her voice steady, but with a tremor of anger beneath it. "I think she's been poisoning me, slowly with that tea she's been giving me. I can't prove it yet, but I know something's wrong." Jenna's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. She folded her hands on the desk and leaned forward. "Madeline, I'm sorry you're going through this. It sounds like Emily's been playing a very dangerous game, and we need to act fast." Madeline nodded, the weight of her decisions settling over her. "I don't know what to do. I need evidence. I need to prove what she's doing before she completely takes control." Jenna didn't hesitate. "We'll get the proof, Madeline. The first step is to protect yourself legally, but to do that, we need evidence. We need something concrete." Madeline's heart pounded as Jenna's words sank in. "What do we do?" she asked. "We're going to install hidden cameras," Jenna said, her voice steady. "Small, discreet ones. They'll capture everything, every move Emily makes in your apartment. We'll get her on tape doing what she's doing. And when we have that proof, we'll move forward with your case." The suggestion hit Madeline like a bolt of lightning. She had been thinking of protecting herself, but this was different. It was bold, direct. It was time to fight back. "We'll set it up," Jenna continued. "The cameras will monitor everything. When Emily comes back, we'll have her recorded. We'll have everything we need to protect you." Madeline nodded, feeling the weight of her decision, but also a rush of empowerment. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just a passive victim in her own life. She was taking action. She was going to make sure Emily couldn't continue her lies, her manipulations. The plan was set in motion that very day. The cameras were installed. Jenna had arranged for Madeline to have legal backup, and now it was time for Emily to learn that the game was over. As Madeline left Jenna's office, she felt a flicker of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. The truth was going to come out, and Emily wouldn't know what hit her. The sound of the waves crashing against the beach echoed in the distance, but for Madeline, the quiet of the beach house was nothing compared to the focus now burning in her chest. She stood in the living room, her hands steady as she checked the small box of hidden cameras Jenna had arranged. They were the size of a quarter, discreet and unobtrusive. With every click of the cameras being positioned in key spots, behind picture frames, nestled in the smoke detector, tucked high on bookshelves, Madeline's resolve solidified. This was no longer just about protecting her possessions. It was about reclaiming her life, her independence, her dignity. Emily had underestimated her. Emily had underestimated the strength of a woman who had survived years of loss, of hard work, and of independence. And now it was time to take back control. As Madeline set the final camera in place, tucked neatly behind a decorative plant in the corner of the living room, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The pieces were falling into place. She wasn't just waiting for Emily's next move. She was preparing to confront it, armed with the truth and the evidence to prove it. The cameras, each one linked to an app on Madeline's phone, would stream live footage directly to her device. The setup was simple but foolproof. The app was password protected, her login known only to her and Jenna. No one would know what Madeline had set in motion. Not Emily, not Ethan, no one. As she finished installing the last of the cameras, her fingers brushed against the cold metal of the doorframe. The weight of the moment sank in. She had done everything she could to protect herself. The cameras would record it all, their actions, their words, their lies. The quiet betrayal that had been festering for months. Madeline's thoughts turned to the next step in her plan, surveillance. It was time to watch, to gather the proof that would finally expose Emily for what she truly was. She sat down on the couch, her phone resting in her lap, as she opened the app. The interface was clean, simple to navigate. Madeline could see all the cameras' live feeds, each one streaming in real time. She started with the camera in the living room. Emily had been in and out of the apartment so often lately that Madeline wasn't sure what Emily might do next, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't afford to miss any of it. The first feed clicked on, showing the empty apartment. The space that had once been Madeline's sanctuary now felt like an arena, one in which Emily had already claimed victory, at least in her mind. But Madeline wasn't defeated. She was far from it. Her thumb hovered over the screen, waiting, anticipating. And then there it was. Emily entered the frame. It was early afternoon, the sunlight streaming through the windows. Emily stepped into the apartment, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She was alone, but there was no mistaking the way she moved with purpose, like someone who knew she had every right to be there. Madeline leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen. Emily walked through the living room, her fingers trailing across the furniture, touching things as if she were already taking inventory. Madeline's breath caught as Emily paused near the sideboard, then opened one of the drawers. She sifted through it carelessly, moving papers aside. The cameras captured every second of it, the faint sound of rustling paper, the quiet click of the drawer closing. Madeline didn't flinch. She didn't react. She was steady, focused. This was exactly what she had expected. Emily was continuing her little game, taking what she wanted, convinced that Madeline wouldn't notice. But Madeline was noticing everything. She saw it all. The app buzzed, and Madeline quickly switched to another feed, the hallway camera just outside the apartment door. Emily had moved further into the apartment now, her movements more calculated. She glanced around as if checking for anything that might have changed. She opened a few more drawers. Then, with a look of satisfaction, Emily picked up a vase and carefully placed it in a box that had been left by the movers. It was a silent admission, though she didn't say it aloud. Everything is mine now. I'm taking it, and no one can stop me. Madeline could feel a knot forming in her stomach. She really believes she has the right to do this, Madeline thought. She's acting like this is already her apartment. But Madeline wasn't going to let her get away with it. The next feed flickered to life. Emily had moved into the bedroom. Madeline's heart rate picked up. She had been waiting for this, waiting to see if Emily would go through her most personal items, her most precious belongings. It didn't take long before Emily opened the closet and began sifting through the clothes Madeline had carefully chosen over the years. The clothes her late husband had bought for her. The pieces that held memories of their time together. Emily's eyes scanned the closet, her fingers brushing across the fabric, but it was the jewelry box that caught her attention. Madeline watched as Emily's fingers lingered over the box for just a moment before opening it. She could almost feel the cold touch of Emily's hand as she picked through the pieces, each item with a story, each one priceless in its sentimental value. Then Madeline saw it. Emily's fingers wrapped around the necklace, the one her husband had given her for their 20th anniversary. The one Madeline had worn to every family gathering, every special occasion. The one that had survived a lifetime of memories. And now, Emily slipped it into her pocket as if it were nothing more than a trinket. I see you, Madeline thought, her grip tightening on the phone. I see exactly what you're doing. The recording caught every word, every movement. Madeline felt a calm, almost detached sense of satisfaction wash over her. Emily hadn't realized it, but with every step she took, with every item she stole, she was building the case that would bring her down. Every moment was captured. Every lie would be exposed. Madeline turned her attention back to the feed. Emily was still moving through the apartment, unaware that Madeline was watching her every move. Madeline didn't feel fear anymore. She didn't feel anxiety. She felt something far more powerful, control. This is only the beginning, Madeline thought, her voice a quiet whisper in the stillness of the beach house. You've underestimated me, Emily, and I'm going to make sure you regret it. With a steady hand, Madeline closed the app and stood up. It was time to take the next step. Madeline stood at the window of the beach house. The sky stretched out before her in hues of soft lavender and pink as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The peaceful view was a sharp contrast to the storm that had been brewing in her mind for days. As the waves lapped gently against the shore, Madeline's thoughts swirled, unwilling to be stilled. It had to be the tea, she thought again, a familiar weight pressing against her chest. It was the tea. The memory of that first evening, when Emily had prepared the herbal concoction, came back to her with unsettling clarity. The gentle aroma of mint, the warm glow of the candlelit kitchen, Emily's sweet voice offering her something good for her circulation. At the time, Madeline had smiled and accepted, her trust placed in the woman who had seemed so eager to be a part of her life. But soon, something had felt off. Every time she drank the tea, the dizziness began. The nausea. The confusion. How did I miss it? The thought struck like a cold slap. Madeline could see it now, the signs that had been there all along, but they had been so subtle, so insidious, that they were easy to ignore. The strange sensation that had lingered long after the tea was gone. The feeling of her mind slipping, just out of reach, like a memory fading before she could grasp it. The moments when she couldn't quite place what had happened the night before or why the simplest tasks felt suddenly overwhelming. But that was just the beginning. She remembered the way her body had betrayed her, the fogginess that clung to her mind after each cup, the disorientation, the weakness. Every time Emily had brewed that tea, it had been followed by a gradual decline in her clarity, her independence, her ability to stay on top of things. That was no accident. Emily had meant for it to happen. She had poisoned her. It wasn't paranoia, Madeline thought with quiet fury. It wasn't my age catching up with me. It was her. It was Emily all along. The revelation was like a cold wave sweeping over her. It wasn't just the tea, it was the whole plan. Emily wasn't just after her things. She was trying to break her down piece by piece until Madeline became nothing more than a shadow of herself, too confused and weak to fight back. She had been trying to make Madeline appear incapable, to undermine her at every turn so she could take what was hers, her home, her life, her very identity. I can't let her get away with this, Madeline thought, her hand tightening around the edge of the windowsill. I won't. Madeline's mind flashed back to the night she had overheard Emily on the phone. The casual way she had mentioned the tea thing didn't work. The way she had laughed, as if it were all a game. The poisoning hadn't worked, but it didn't matter. The plan was already in motion. The damage had been done. Her pulse quickened as the full scope of Emily's manipulation became clearer. Emily had been playing a long game. Every visit, every smile, every seemingly innocent conversation. It had all been part of the plan to wear Madeline down, to make her doubt herself, to make her feel like she was losing control of her own life. But Emily had underestimated Madeline. She hadn't counted on Madeline fighting back. The realization was a bitter one, but it also gave Madeline the clarity she needed. I'm not going to let her win. I'm not going to be the victim in her story. With the decision came a quiet resolve, a strength that Madeline had almost forgotten she possessed. She wasn't going to let Emily control her narrative. She wasn't going to let her steal her life, her independence, and her dignity without a fight. It's time to confront this, Madeline thought, her breath steady as she turned away from the window. Time to expose the truth and show Emily that she can't hide behind lies anymore. The path ahead was clear. Madeline would confront Emily head-on, but she wasn't going to do it alone. She had the evidence, the cameras, the recordings, the proof, and now she had a plan. The fight was far from over, but Madeline knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. As she picked up her phone and dialed Jenna's number, the weight of everything that had happened, and everything that was still to come, settled over her with a quiet sense of purpose. I'm ready, she thought. I'm ready to take back my life. Madeline stood in front of the mirror, her fingers brushing over the fabric of her blouse. She had carefully chosen it, a soft gray that felt like a shield, the color calming but purposeful. The reflection staring back at her seemed composed, but beneath the surface, her heart pounded. This is it, she thought. It's time to face him. She had spent years raising Ethan, guiding him through the ups and downs of life. She had been his rock, his protector, the one constant in his life. But now, standing in the hallway of her apartment about to confront her son, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was unraveling. She wasn't sure how to navigate this conversation, but she knew it had to happen. There was no other way. The doorbell rang. Madeline's heart skipped a beat. She opened the door to find Ethan standing on the other side, looking tired. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled as if he hadn't bothered to change out of them after a long day. Despite the exhaustion written on his face, there was something else in his posture, something hesitant, uncertain. He looked like he wasn't sure what he was walking into. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't place. He stepped forward as if to embrace her, but Madeline stepped back, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "Ethan," she said quietly, but firmly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We need to talk." His face fell slightly, and Madeline could see the reluctance in his eyes. It was as if he already knew what was coming but wasn't ready to face it. He was holding something back, and it was only adding to the tension between them. "Mom, I don't know if I'm ready for this," Ethan said, his voice a mix of frustration and confusion. "What's going on? Why are you acting like this?" Madeline crossed her arms, staring at him with a mixture of hurt and determination. This is my son, she thought, my flesh and blood. And yet he's standing here blind to the truth. "You need to hear me out," she said, her voice softer now but still holding firm. "It's about Emily and what she's been doing." Ethan's face immediately shifted, his brow furrowing with disbelief. "What are you talking about, Mom? Emily's been nothing but supportive. You're just imagining things. I don't know why you're making all this up." The words hit Madeline like a slap to the face. Imagining things? She had spent years building a life for herself, a life she was proud of, and now Ethan was questioning her perception of reality. He was dismissing her concerns as if they were nothing more than the ramblings of an old woman. "I'm not imagining things, Ethan," Madeline said, her voice growing stronger, but the pain behind her words was evident. "I've been watching. I've seen everything. The way Emily's been manipulating me, trying to undermine me. The way she's been slowly taking everything from me, my home, my things. And now she's been poisoning me." Ethan's face went pale and he took a step back. "Poisoning you?" His voice was barely a whisper, a mix of shock and disbelief. "Mom, that's crazy. That's not true." Madeline could see the doubt in his eyes, but it wasn't just disbelief. It was something deeper. It was as if he couldn't fathom the idea that his wife, the woman he had married, could do something so heinous. She could see the weight of his loyalty to Emily hanging over him like a dark cloud, making it impossible for him to see the truth. "Ethan, I have the proof," Madeline said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have everything recorded, the cameras, the phone calls, the way she's been taking my things. The way she's been poisoning my tea, trying to make me confused, weak, so she can take what's mine." Ethan shook his head, his eyes wide with disbelief, but there was a flicker of something in his gaze, a flicker of doubt buried beneath the surface. "Mom, this is insane. You're making it sound like something out of a movie. You're imagining all of this. Emily's not like that. She's been good to you. She's been helping." Madeline's chest tightened, and she fought back the tears that threatened to fall. Helping? All these months of manipulation, of undermining her confidence, of making her feel like she was losing her grip on reality. Emily had been pretending to help, all the while plotting to take everything. And Ethan, her son, the one person she had trusted more than anyone, was standing there, protecting his wife, refusing to see the truth. "Ethan, you don't see it, do you?" Madeline said, her voice cracking with emotion. "You don't see what's been happening. She's been controlling everything. She's been turning you against me little by little, and now she's convinced you I'm the problem, that I'm the one who's losing it. But it's not me, Ethan, it's her." Ethan's face twisted in frustration, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "No, Mom, you don't get it. You don't understand. You're accusing Emily of all these terrible things, but you're the one who's pushing her away. She's my wife. I love her. I've chosen her. I can't just turn my back on her for you." The words hit Madeline harder than anything she could have imagined. He's chosen her over me. He's chosen a stranger over his own mother. Her heart shattered in that moment, but she knew she couldn't let the pain show. Not now, not when the truth was on the line. "I'm not asking you to choose, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice firm but raw with emotion. "I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you what's been happening. And you have to decide if you want to keep living in a lie or if you're ready to face what's really going on." Ethan stood there, silent for a long moment. His eyes flickered between Madeline and the floor, his mind clearly battling the words he didn't want to believe. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and suffocating, before he finally spoke again. I can't do this, he muttered, his voice cracking with the weight of it. I can't just throw my wife away, she's all I have now. Madeline felt the final blow. She had raised him. She had loved him. And now he was throwing her away for someone who had never cared about her. The betrayal was complete. Then I guess we're done here, Madeline whispered, turning away from him. If you can't see what she's done, then there's nothing more to say. Ethan reached out, his hand trembling, but Madeline didn't turn back. She couldn't. She had already lost him. And though the pain was unbearable, there was a strength in knowing that she was no longer willing to pretend everything was okay. Not when the truth was finally out. As the door closed behind him, Madeline let out a shaky breath. The weight of the conversation pressed down on her, but she didn't cry. She wouldn't. Not for him, not for Emily. This was her fight now, and she would finish it no matter the cost. The weight of the confrontation with Ethan lingered in the air like an unshakable fog, thick with the bitterness of betrayal and loss. Madeline sat at her desk, staring at the piles of paperwork in front of her, her thoughts racing. The conversation had left her shaken, but it had also done something else, something she hadn't expected. It had hardened her resolve. She couldn't go back now. There was no turning back from this path. Emily had pushed too far, manipulated too much, and now it was time to take control. To fight back. Madeline took a deep breath, steadying herself. The phone buzzed on her desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Jenna, her lawyer, and the one person who had stood by her from the beginning. The message was short, direct. We need to act fast. You know what to do. Madeline's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment was coming. The need for irrefutable proof. The cameras, the physical evidence. She grabbed her phone and immediately dialed Jenna's number. It rang once, then twice, before Jenna's calm, reassuring voice filled the line. Madeline, are you okay? I'm ready, Madeline said, her voice steady, unwavering. It's time. I'm going to get everything I need to put an end to this. I'm with you every step of the way, Jenna replied, a note of encouragement in her voice. You've already taken the first step. The cameras, the recordings, they're already critical pieces of evidence. But we need more, physical proof, things that Emily has taken. We need to gather it all. Madeline nodded, even though Jenna couldn't see her. I've already started. I'm putting in more cameras. I'm going to catch her red-handed. Jenna's voice softened, almost empathetic. I know how hard this is, Madeline, but you're doing the right thing. She's been manipulating you for too long. And now you're taking back control. You're taking your life back. A quiet strength surged within Madeline. She was tired of being the victim, tired of feeling like she was losing everything. Emily had underestimated her, but now Madeline was going to show her that she wouldn't be silenced, wouldn't be pushed aside. I'll start today, Madeline said. I'll gather everything. The cameras are already set, but I'll go through every room, collect the things she's taken, get the physical proof we need. It's time to confront her. That's exactly what we need, Jenna replied. And once you've gathered the evidence, we'll move forward with the legal action. We'll expose everything, her lies, her manipulation. The truth will come out. The conversation ended, and Madeline hung up the phone with a renewed sense of purpose. She stood up and walked to the small closet where she kept the boxes she had been preparing for the last few days. These were not for moving. They were for something far more important. With careful hands, she began packing items, one by one, things Emily had taken without her knowledge, little pieces of her life that had been slowly chipped away. The necklaces, the papers, the photos that Emily had gone through, the jewelry box where precious memories lay hidden. It wasn't just about the material possessions. It was about the principle, about the life she had built, and how Emily had tried to erase it bit by bit. Madeline's movements were swift, decisive. She wasn't the frail woman Emily thought she was. She wasn't the passive mother-in-law, easily brushed aside. Madeline was taking control. She was preparing for the final confrontation. She worked late into the night, packing everything in order, documents, jewelry, even small items that Emily had no right to touch. When the boxes were full, Madeline stepped back and looked at the carefully organized collection of evidence. Her heart was pounding with anticipation. This was the proof she had been waiting for. the proof that would expose Emily for who she really was. The next morning, Madeline opened the app on her phone again, checking the live feeds from the hidden cameras. The feeds showed an empty apartment. But she knew that Emily would come again, sooner or later, and when she did, Madeline would be ready. Madeline's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Jenna. "Once you have everything, we'll begin the legal process. No more holding back." The message was simple, but it was the push Madeline needed. She was no longer fighting alone. Jenna had been her anchor throughout this process, guiding her every step of the way, helping her find the strength to stand up for herself. Now, it was time for Madeline to take the final steps, to bring everything into the light and confront Emily once and for all. That afternoon, Madeline returned to her apartment. She surveyed the space once more, making sure everything was in place. Her gaze moved over the camera feeds, each one providing her with a quiet sense of power. She was in control. She had the proof. She opened the closet one last time and carefully picked up a small framed photo of her late husband. It had always been by her side, a reminder of the love they had shared, the life they had built together. She stood there for a moment, allowing the rush of memories to wash over her. Then, with a deep breath, she placed the photo in the box with the rest of the evidence. Madeline was ready. She picked up her phone, her fingers steady as she texted Jenna. "It's all done. We have everything. Now let's take her down." As Madeline set the phone down, she couldn't help but smile, a sense of calm confidence settling within her. This was it. This was her moment. No more hiding, no more doubting herself. She was going to take back what was rightfully hers, and this time Emily wouldn't be able to take it from her. With a final glance around the apartment, Madeline felt something inside her shift. She had faced the storm, and now she was the one in control of the winds. The confrontation was coming, and when it did, Madeline would be ready. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was muted in the background as Madeline sat in Jenna's office, a folder full of legal papers in front of her. The room was serene, yet the tension in the air was palpable. For months, Madeline had been feeling the weight of Emily's manipulations pressing down on her, but now, here with Jenna, the battle lines were finally being drawn. Jenna's office, bright with natural light, filled with the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee, felt like a refuge. Yet, within these walls, the war was about to begin. "Madeline, we need to make sure we have everything in place to protect you," Jenna said, her tone professional but full of warmth. She sat across from Madeline, a stack of documents neatly arranged on her desk, ready to be dissected. Jenna's calm presence was a stark contrast to the storm swirling within Madeline. Madeline nodded, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. It's time, she thought, feeling a surge of determination. It's time to expose her for what she is. "First," Jenna continued, opening a folder and placing it in front of Madeline, "we need to deal with the guardianship claim. Emily is likely to push for it, especially now that she's making these accusations about your mental instability. It's a typical tactic. She's trying to make you look weak, incapable of handling your affairs so she can control everything. But we're going to counter that." Madeline felt a pang of disgust at the thought. Weak, incapable. Those words had been used against her so many times lately, but they didn't define her. She had spent her life building her career, her family, and now Emily wanted to strip it all away, along with her dignity. Not if I can help it, Madeline thought firmly. Jenna pulled out a few sheets of paper. "To protect you, we'll need a psychological evaluation to show that you're fully in control of your faculties. No signs of dementia, no cognitive decline. We'll need the report from Dr. Hayes to be as clear and specific as possible." Madeline's chest tightened slightly. A psychological evaluation. It was a humbling step, but she knew it was necessary. Emily had planted the seed of doubt in Ethan's mind. Now it was time to put that doubt to rest once and for all. "I've already scheduled the appointment with Dr. Hayes," Jenna said, reading Madeline's thoughts. "We'll need to make sure the evaluation is thorough, so there's no question about your mental state. It's going to be exhaustive, and you'll be under scrutiny. But the goal is to have a certified expert back up your competency." Madeline took a deep breath, nodding. She could do this. She had to do this. "Next," Jenna continued, sliding a document across the table to Madeline. We'll need to update your will and create legal documents that protect your assets. These will explicitly state that no property can be sold, transferred, or altered without your permission. We're going to put safeguards in place to ensure that Emily cannot manipulate the situation anymore. This is going to be a critical part of your defense. Madeline looked at the document, her hand hovering over it. The thought of creating a will with specific clauses about her properties, about her future, felt surreal. But it also gave her a sense of control. It was her life, her money, her legacy. Emily didn't have the right to take any of it. Jenna's voice broke through her thoughts. The new will include a clause that no transactions can take place without two independent witnesses. This will be key to showing that any action taken without your consent, like trying to sell your apartment, will be illegal. This will help us block any attempts Emily makes to move your assets. Madeline nodded slowly. It's all coming together. For so long, Emily had played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law, pretending to care while secretly undermining her. But now, Madeline was stepping into the light, armed with proof, with strategies. She wasn't going to let Emily control her anymore. Lastly, Jenna said, her voice lowering slightly, we'll need to have the evidence we've gathered, everything from the cameras, the recordings, and the thefts. All of that will come into play in court. Emily will try to deny it all, claim that everything is a misunderstanding. But with the evidence we have, she won't be able to hide from the truth. Madeline's hands clenched around the edge of the folder. I have the proof. The recordings, the stolen items, the confessions. Emily couldn't escape it, not anymore. Jenna smiled softly, as if reading Madeline's thoughts. We're going to take this step by step, Madeline. We have a solid case. You've already gathered more than enough evidence. Now we just need to make sure we protect it and prepare for the long legal fight ahead. We'll confront Emily's actions head-on. Madeline's heart raced, but the panic was different now. It wasn't fear anymore, it was a powerful sense of purpose. For the first time in months, she felt like she was in control. Emily's lies. Her manipulations, her cold-hearted attempts to take what wasn't hers, they would all be exposed. Madeline looked up at Jenna, a sense of gratitude filling her chest. Thank you, Jenna, for helping me, for standing by me. Jenna leaned back in her chair, her expression warm yet focused. You're stronger than you think, Madeline. You've already been through so much. This is just the final step. We're in this together. Madeline let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle firmly into place. The battle was far from over, but she wasn't backing down. She would fight for everything she had built, everything she had worked for, and for the life she still had ahead of her. As she left Jenna's office, the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft, golden light over the city. Madeline felt a sense of clarity, of empowerment. She was ready. The legal strategy was set, the plan was in motion, and there was no turning back now. Emily's reign of manipulation was coming to an end, and Madeline would be the one to see it through to the finish. Madeline stood in front of the full-length mirror, taking a moment to study her reflection. The soft gray blouse and tailored pants were the same outfit she'd worn countless times, but today it felt different. Today she would walk into the lion's den. Today she would sit across from Emily, her daughter-in-law, and the others, playing the role of the dutiful mother-in-law, all while beneath the surface, everything had already changed. The invitation had come on a whim, a polite yet pointed message from Emily. Rose, we're hosting a small family lunch on Sunday. I'd love for you to come. It's time we all gathered together, don't you think? Madeline had debated whether she should attend at all. After everything that had happened, after all the betrayal and the mounting evidence, she had half a mind to cancel. But she knew better. Emily wanted this lunch. She wanted to create a perfect, controlled environment where she could pretend nothing was amiss. Madeline would go. Not because she felt obligated, but because she needed to see Emily in her element. She needed to see the game Emily was still playing, the mask she wore so perfectly. This lunch would be the final straw, the moment that solidified her decision to take legal action. She took one last look in the mirror, making sure the calm composure in her reflection was genuine. I'm not going to let her control this, Madeline thought. I won't let her make me feel small. The drive to Emily and Ethan's apartment was quiet. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays across the city streets, but the warmth in the air only reminded Madeline of the cool, calculating atmosphere that awaited her. When she arrived, Emily opened the door with her trademark smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Rose, so glad you could make it." Emily's voice was syrupy sweet, almost too bright, too cheerful. She stepped aside, ushering Madeline in with exaggerated politeness. "Come on in. Ethan's just finishing up in the kitchen, and I've invited a few other people, my mother and brother, some friends. It'll be nice to have a full house." Madeline stepped into the apartment, her eyes sweeping over the familiar space. The furniture, the decor, all had changed since the last time she'd been here, almost as if Emily had curated everything to perfection to impress. It was obvious she wanted to control the environment, make everything look pristine, flawless. For show, Madeline thought, suppressing the ache of discomfort creeping into her chest. "Come on, let's sit," Emily said, leading her to the dining table. Madeline couldn't help but notice how Emily's movements were overly gracious, too practiced. It was as if she had memorized the role she was playing, the role of the perfect hostess, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. "But the truth is coming out, Emily. You're not fooling me anymore." Madeline took a seat at the table, her back straight, her gaze steady as she watched Emily bustle around. Ethan appeared from the kitchen with a weak smile, his face drawn, clearly not fully awake to the tension in the room. As they began to serve lunch, Emily kept up her performance, complimenting the food, chatting incessantly as if everything was normal. "Mom, how's work been?" Ethan asked casually, cutting into his roast chicken. Madeline looked at her son, her eyes lingering on him for a moment longer than necessary. "You should be asking me about how I am, Ethan, not just making polite conversation." But instead, she smiled softly, replying, "It's been good, busy as usual. You know me, always keeping my hands full." Emily's smile faltered for just a second, but it was barely noticeable. "I was just saying to Ethan the other day, it must be exhausting for you, living in such a big apartment all alone. I mean, you're not getting any younger, Rose. It must be hard to keep up with everything on your own. The cleaning, the maintenance, the bills. It must be so much for someone your age." Madeline felt a chill run down her spine at the subtle jab. There it is again, she thought, the same tone that had haunted every conversation they'd had over the past months. The subtle undermining of my independence. "Oh, I'm managing just fine," Madeline replied, keeping her voice even, the warmth of her words masking the tension beneath. "I like having space, it's peaceful." Emily didn't miss a beat, moving on to the next passive-aggressive comment. Of course. I just think sometimes it's a lot for one person. I'm sure it would be easier if you had someone to help you. Maybe even someone younger who understands technology, finances, those kinds of things. I'm sure Ethan and I could help you with everything. You know, for your own peace of mind." The insinuation hung in the air like smoke, burning Madeline's chest. "You're trying to control everything again," she thought, her fingers tightening around her fork. "You're trying to take everything from me, my life, my independence, my sense of who I am." "Thank you, Emily, but I'm doing just fine on my own," Madeline said, her voice firm, but with an edge that couldn't be ignored. Emily's smile barely wavered, but the edges of her eyes flickered with something darker. "I'm just offering to help, Rose. I mean, you're getting older. You don't want to end up like my grandmother, do you? She needed help. She couldn't take care of herself. We don't want that to happen to you." The words hit Madeline like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she met Emily's eyes with quiet defiance. "I don't need your help, Emily," Madeline said, the words deliberate and sharp. "I've spent my whole life taking care of myself. I've built everything I have on my own, and I intend to keep it that way." Emily's smile tightened. She was good at this, Madeline had to admit. She was good at making things sound so reasonable, so for her own good. But Madeline saw through it now. "I'm not your pawn," she thought, "and I'm not going to let you turn me into one." The lunch continued, but the tension was thick, suffocating. Emily kept talking, her words laced with veiled insults and helpful suggestions. The more she spoke, the more Madeline felt herself withdrawing into herself, a quiet fury building inside her. Every smile, every laugh, every attempt to control the room, it all made Madeline more certain that Emily was trying to destroy her, piece by piece. As dessert was served, Madeline found herself clenching her hands under the table, feeling the heat rise to her face. This was the final test. This lunch wasn't just a meal. It was a performance, a show where Emily tried to control everything, her son, her environment, and now her future. Madeline wasn't going to let her win. Not today, not ever. "I'm glad you invited me, Emily," Madeline said, her voice steady but laced with finality. "But I think I'm ready to go. I have a few things to take care of." Emily's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with false sweetness. "Of course, Rose. We'll do this again soon." Madeline stood up, her heart pounding, but she didn't hesitate. As she made her way toward the door, she felt a sense of clarity. This is it. This is the last time I'm letting her push me around. When she stepped out into the cool air, the weight on her chest lightened just a fraction. She had made it through the lunch, but more importantly, she had made a decision. Emily had shown her hand. It was time to take action. As Madeline drove home, the plan took shape in her mind. She was done letting Emily control her life. It was time for the truth to come out. And with the evidence she had gathered, Emily wouldn't be able to hide from it any longer. This was no longer just about a lunch. This was war. And Madeline was ready to win. The early morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Madeline's living room, casting a soft glow over the space. Yet, the light that had once felt welcoming now seemed distant, too harsh. The tension in the apartment was palpable as Madeline sat in her favorite armchair, her fingers loosely wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't truly tasting. It had been a few days since the family lunch, and Madeline had been doing everything in her power to focus on what mattered: her work, her friends, and the steps she was taking to protect herself. But there was one thing she couldn't shake: the feeling that Emily's game wasn't over. The seeds of doubt that Emily had planted were beginning to sprout, and Madeline knew it was only a matter of time before Emily made her move to finish what she had started. As if on cue, Madeline's phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Jenna. "I've received some disturbing news. Emily's been talking to people about you, spreading rumors. I'll meet you at 2 p.m. to discuss it." Madeline's stomach twisted, but she steadied herself, setting the coffee down. She's doing it again, Madeline thought, the realization sinking in. Emily was spinning her web again. At 2 p.m., Madeline arrived at Jenna's office, the weight of what she was about to hear hanging heavily on her. Jenna was already waiting for her, her expression grave. As Madeline sat down, Jenna wasted no time. "Madeline, I don't know how to say this, but Emily's been talking to people, trying to paint you as mentally unstable," Jenna began, her tone professional but laced with concern. "She's telling people that you're forgetful, that you've been acting paranoid, that you're incapable of managing your own affairs. She's making it sound like you're losing your grip on reality." Madeline felt the blood drain from her face as Jenna's words hit her like a punch. She's spreading lies. The reality of it washed over her in a wave of anger and disbelief. Emily had been working behind the scenes, manipulating others, trying to isolate Madeline and weaken her position. This was her endgame. She wasn't just after my things. She was trying to take my sanity. Jenna's voice softened as she continued. "She's talking to your friends, even some of the people at your gym, claiming that you've been forgetting things, that you're a bit off lately. It's all part of the narrative she's trying to create, making people believe you're not mentally capable." Madeline clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She's been doing this for months, Madeline realized. All the comments about my age, the tea, the way she's been undermining me at every turn, it was all part of this. She's been building a case against me, trying to make me look like I'm losing my mind. Madeline's heart pounded in her chest as Jenna spoke again, her words sharp but calm. "We can't let her get away with this, Madeline. If she's trying to manipulate others into thinking you're mentally incompetent, we need to expose her. You've gathered enough evidence. You have the recordings, the photos of what she's taken from your apartment, and now we can prove that she's been feeding this narrative to others." Madeline's thoughts raced, and she felt her stomach turn with a mixture of dread and determination. She'd known Emily was manipulative, but this was something else entirely. She was playing a dangerous game now, and Madeline was the pawn she intended to sacrifice. Madeline's gaze hardened. "I won't let her get away with this," she said quietly, but the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. She could feel the surge of anger rising within her, but it wasn't just anger. It was something else, something fiercer. The betrayal was deep, but it also awakened something in Madeline that she hadn't realized was still there, her fighting spirit. Jenna nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "We'll stop her, Madeline, but you need to stay calm. We need to be strategic. Let her think she's winning, let her keep making these moves. Every step she takes is more evidence we can use against her." Madeline nodded slowly, feeling the resolve settle within her like a stone. "I've been silent for too long," she thought, "but now I'm taking back control." Over the next few days, Madeline continued with the plan she and Jenna had set in motion. She kept her distance from Emily, maintaining the calm facade while quietly watching her every move. The recordings, the evidence, the witnesses, all of it was slowly building. But now, there was something else, something that made Madeline's heart burn with more intensity than ever before. She knew exactly what Emily was up to. One evening, Madeline decided to confront it head-on. She invited a few of her closest friends over for dinner, people she trusted, people who knew her well. Jenna was one of them, and when she arrived, Madeline didn't waste any time. "I know what she's doing," Madeline said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet anger. "She's trying to make me look crazy. She's spreading rumors, manipulating everyone. And now she's trying to paint me as someone incapable of managing my life. I won't let her do this." Her friends looked at her with wide eyes, concern and understanding flooding their expressions. Claire, one of Madeline's oldest friends, reached across the table and took her hand. "Madeline, we know you. We know you're not losing your mind. You've been the one who's always been there for us. Emily can't take that away." "I've been documenting everything," Madeline said, the determination in her voice unwavering. "I have the proof. I'm not going to let her tear my life apart." The conversation continued, with Jenna providing further legal advice and Claire and the others offering their full support. They discussed how best to counter Emily's narrative, making sure they were all on the same page. It was a turning point. Madeline wasn't alone anymore. She had a team behind her, and together they would fight back. That night, as Madeline lay in bed, she thought back to the moment when she had realized Emily's true intentions. The layers of manipulation, the cold disregard for Madeline's life, and the calculated attempt to take everything, it was all part of the plan. But now, Madeline was no longer just a victim. She was the one holding the cards. She was the one in control. The battle was far from over, but as she closed her eyes that night, Madeline felt a quiet peace settle within her. She knew what she had to do, and she was ready for the fight that was coming. Madeline sat in Jenna's office once again, her hands folded tightly in her lap, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. Her heart had been racing ever since she'd received Jenna's call earlier that morning. The urgency in Jenna's voice had been impossible to ignore. "Madeline, I need you to come to my office. I've got something you need to see. It's time we put all the pieces together." "Now." As Madeline sat across from Jenna, she felt her stomach churn with a sense of foreboding. What could it be? She wondered. She had already gathered so much footage, photos, recordings. But somehow, she knew that the worst was still ahead of her. Emily had been playing a long game, and Madeline was about to see just how far she had gone. Jenna opened her laptop without a word, her fingers flying over the keys as she pulled up the video. Madeline's breath hitched as the file loaded. Jenna clicked play. At first, it seemed like any other video, a blurry image of the apartment, the usual angles from the hidden cameras. But then, Madeline's eyes widened as the footage shifted, zooming in on Emily, standing in the middle of her living room. Beside her was a man, sharply dressed in a suit, holding a clipboard and talking to Emily with a professional air. It was a real estate agent. Madeline's throat tightened as she watched, disbelief and shock flooding her senses. The man spoke first, his voice calm and methodical. "This apartment is in a prime location," he said, glancing at the documents in his hand. "It's a great investment, but we'll need to move quickly. The owner is apparently not in any condition to make decisions, so we can proceed with the sale without any delays." Emily nodded, her smile cold, rehearsed. She didn't look worried at all, not the way someone would if they were selling someone else's property without permission. Madeline leaned forward, her heart pounding. She could hear every word the real estate agent said, the casual tone that made Madeline's blood run cold. The agent continued, "Once we have the guardianship in place, everything will be in order. The sale of the apartment can go through immediately." The video cut to a scene where Emily was showing the agent around, pointing out the apartment's best features with a smile that made Madeline's blood boil. "I'll make sure the papers are ready," Emily said with an almost satisfied look on her face as she led the agent into the living room. "Once everything is in place, we'll finalize the sale and get the funds transferred. It'll be easy. After all, she doesn't even know what's happening." Madeline could feel the air in the room thicken as she watched. The full weight of Emily's betrayal settled in her chest, suffocating her. She was planning to sell my apartment behind my back, to take everything I had worked for and turn it into profit for herself. And she didn't even have the decency to be discreet about it. She thought I wouldn't find out. Jenna paused the video, and Madeline's eyes darted to her lawyer's face. She could see the anger in Jenna's expression, but there was something else there too. Resolve. Jenna wasn't just angry, she was ready to fight. "I'm sorry you had to see that, Madeline," Jenna said, her voice steady but laced with determination. "But this is the proof we needed. Emily has been planning this for a while now. She's been actively trying to sell your apartment without your consent, using the guardianship as a way to legitimize the sale." Madeline's hands shook as she stared at the screen, still processing what she had just seen. It was almost too much to take in. This was my home, my sanctuary, and Emily had turned it into a commodity, something to be sold to the highest bidder. "Jenna," Madeline said, her voice tight with anger, "how could she do this? How could she lie to me like this?" Jenna leaned forward, her expression softened by the empathy she felt for her client, but her voice was firm. "She's been manipulating you from the start. She's tried to make you believe you were losing your mind, that you couldn't take care of yourself, that you needed help. It's all been a ploy to isolate you, to make it easier for her to take what she wants. She's been playing the long game, but now we have the evidence to stop her." Madeline felt her throat tighten, the sting of betrayal cutting deeper than she could have imagined. Emily had been playing me the entire time. She had been pretending to care, pretending to be the loving, dutiful daughter-in-law while quietly planning to rob her of everything Madeline had worked for. I trusted her. Jenna put the laptop aside and locked eyes with Madeline. "We've got this, Madeline. We're going to bring this to light. We have the video, the recordings, and now we know her intentions. Emily's actions will be exposed. You don't have to go through this alone." Madeline looked at Jenna, her heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. "What do we do next?" Jenna stood up and walked to the filing cabinet, pulling out a thick stack of papers. She placed them on the table in front of Madeline. "Next, we begin the legal process. We file for a restraining order to prevent her from trying to sell the apartment. We also file a civil suit to recover any property she's stolen or tried to sell. And most importantly, we expose her actions for what they are, a deliberate attempt to steal your assets." Madeline stood up, her hands steady despite the fire burning inside her. She wasn't going to back down anymore. She wasn't going to let Emily get away with this. Not now, not ever. "I'm ready," Madeline said, her voice steady and determined. "Let's do this." Jenna smiled, a mix of pride and determination in her eyes. "We're going to take her down, and when it's over, she won't be able to hurt you anymore." Madeline took one last look at the screen, at the image of Emily, the woman who had once seemed so harmless, now exposed for the manipulative, deceitful person she truly was. The full extent of Emily's betrayal had been revealed, but with the truth in hand, Madeline was no longer afraid. This was the turning point. This was where everything changed, and this time Madeline was in control. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows across the streets outside Madeline's apartment. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Madeline paced slowly back and forth, her mind racing. The security footage on her phone was still running, showing Emily and the movers, those unwitting accomplices, preparing to take her belongings. Madeline could hear the sound of her heartbeat in her ears, each thud resonating with a sense of justice just out of reach. But that feeling was quickly replaced by the rush of purpose that now flooded her veins. She glanced at her watch. It was 5:15 p.m. 5 minutes, she thought. 5 minutes until this nightmare finally ends. Her phone buzzed. It was Jenna. "The police are on their way. They're 5 minutes out. Stay calm, this is it." Madeline held her breath. The last few months had been a blur of tension, manipulation, and quiet preparations. But now, everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, was about to come to light. She walked to the living room window, her gaze shifting to the street below. In the distance, she saw the familiar blue and red flashing lights of a squad car. They were here. This was it. The truth is about to come crashing down. The doorbell rang, breaking her thoughts. Madeline's heart leaped into her chest, but she steadied herself, walking toward the door with deliberate steps. As she opened it, she was greeted by two uniformed officers, both looking serious, their hands resting lightly on their belts. "Ms. Madeline Montgomery," one officer asked, his voice calm but authoritative. "That's me," Madeline replied, her voice steady, though her stomach fluttered with anticipation. "We have a warrant to search the premises," the officer said. "We've been notified about a possible break-in. We need to speak with the individuals inside." Madeline's lips parted in a small, knowing smile. "They're in there already. They're the ones who need to be arrested." With a firm nod, the officers stepped inside. The sound of their footsteps echoed down the hallway as they moved toward the living room. The tension in Madeline's body dissolved slightly. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when Emily's lies would unravel and the truth would come tumbling out. As the officers entered the living room, they were met with the scene she had been watching all along. Emily, standing near the sofa, her hand poised over a box, froze at the sight of the police. The three movers were huddled by the door, confused and unsure of what was happening. They hadn't known the full scope of Emily's plan, and now they were just as shocked as Emily. The taller officer spoke first. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you. You're under arrest for breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy to defraud." Emily's face flushed bright red, her expression quickly shifting from surprise to defiance. "What? This is ridiculous," she spat, taking a step back. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I have every right to be here. This is my property now. My mother-in-law signed everything over to me. I have the legal papers." She scrambled in her bag for the fake documents she'd been using to justify her actions, shoving them at the officers with exaggerated urgency. The officers glanced at the papers, one of them shaking his head. "These are falsified documents. They don't hold up." Emily's gaze shifted quickly between the officers and Madeline, her eyes narrowing as she realized the truth was out. "This is insane," she cried. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm just taking what's mine. She's crazy, you have to understand. She gave me permission. This is all hers." Madeline stood tall, her eyes cold as she locked eyes with Emily. "You didn't take anything from me, Emily. You tried to steal it. You lied, manipulated, and used my own family to get what you wanted. But it's over now." Emily's cheeks flushed with rage, her voice rising in desperation. "This is my husband's apartment. He's going to hear about this. You can't do this to me." She turned to the movers, her voice tinged with panic. "You can't just leave. You're getting paid for this. Help me, don't just stand there." But the movers, now realizing the full extent of Emily's deception, stood frozen in place. One of them, a tall man with a scruffy beard, looked at the officers, then at Emily, before slowly shaking his head. "We didn't know it was like this," he muttered. "I just thought we were moving stuff for her." The second mover, a younger man, added, "We had no idea. We were just told to do the job. I didn't know it was someone else's stuff." Madeline felt a brief moment of sympathy for them, but the moment passed quickly. They were guilty only of being duped by Emily, just as she had been. But the real culprit was standing right in front of her. Emily, now cornered, turned back to Madeline with venom in her voice. You think this is over. You don't know who you're messing with. I'll make sure you regret this. You'll never get your life back. You'll never get your apartment back." She advanced toward Madeline, her hands clenched in fists, ready to lash out. But before she could take another step, one of the officers blocked her path. "You need to calm down, ma'am," the officer warned. "If you don't, we'll have to restrain you." The officers moved in, quickly handcuffing Emily, who screamed, "This isn't happening. This is my property. You don't understand. I'll fight this. I'm entitled to this." Madeline stood silently, her heart pounding with a mixture of emotions. Vindication, relief, but above all, clarity. She had done what she needed to do. She had exposed Emily for who she truly was, and now there was no turning back. The officers led Emily out of the apartment, her protests echoing down the hall. The movers stood awkwardly by the door, unsure of what to do next. One of them, the man with the scruffy beard, approached Madeline hesitantly. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We didn't know. We were just trying to do our jobs. I'm sorry for what she put you through." Madeline nodded, her gaze softening slightly. "It's over now. You don't need to apologize, just leave this mess behind." The door closed behind them, and the apartment felt quieter, emptier than it had in months. Madeline stood in the center of the room, the silence settling in around her like a protective shield. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long was finally starting to lift. She looked around the apartment at the furniture that had been moved, the boxes that were no longer her own. "It's just stuff," she reminded herself. "It can all be replaced. But the truth, that's what I've been fighting for. That's what matters." Madeline took a deep breath, the first one she'd taken in what felt like forever. The fight wasn't over, but this was the turning point. Emily's actions were exposed, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. The police would handle the rest, but for Madeline, this moment was her victory, and it was just the beginning. The courthouse was a cold, imposing structure, its marble walls echoing with the footsteps of people passing by, each one lost in their own thoughts. Madeline stood at the entrance for a moment, looking up at the building as if it were a mountain she had to climb, but the climb had already begun. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Madeline's heart hammered in her chest as she walked down the hallway toward the courtroom. The familiar hum of murmured voices, the shuffle of shoes on the polished floors, it all felt so surreal. This wasn't the world she had known. She had spent so much of her life building, protecting, living without fear. But now, here she was about to fight for her dignity, her life, and her future in front of a judge, a jury, and a room full of strangers. She entered the courtroom, the heavy wooden doors closing behind her with a soft thud. The room was filled with people, lawyers, the jury, journalists who had heard of the case, and of course, Emily and her lawyer. Emily, sitting at the table with a smug expression, was dressed sharply in a dark suit, her usual facade of confidence intact. But there was something about the way she held herself now, something brittle in her gaze, that told Madeline everything. She had underestimated her. Madeline took her seat, her lawyer, Jenna, beside her. Jenna gave her a reassuring smile, but Madeline could see the same fire in her eyes that Madeline had felt in her own heart since the moment this nightmare had started. The trial was about to begin, and everything was on the line. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a stern expression, called the room to order. "We're here today to hear the case of Madeline Montgomery versus Emily Montgomery. Miss Emily Montgomery is accused of breaking and entering, theft, document forgery, and attempted poisoning." Madeline's breath caught in her throat at the sound of those words. The accusations were no longer just whispers. They were real. Emily's actions were finally being recognized, and the walls Madeline had built around herself, walls of denial and doubt, were crumbling away. The trial was long, stretching across several days as both sides presented their evidence. Madeline watched, heart in her throat, as Emily's lawyer tried to twist the truth, attempting to paint Madeline as an unreliable witness, a woman too old to understand what was happening. Emily took the stand, her voice smooth, rehearsed. She described the events in a way that made it sound as though she was the victim, painting Madeline as an overreacting, confused old woman. "She's paranoid," Emily said, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. She believes I've been trying to take advantage of her, but it's simply not true. I was only trying to help. I was only trying to manage her affairs for her own good. She was refusing to face the truth that she was no longer capable of managing her own life. Madeline sat stiff in her chair, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I'm not paranoid, she thought. I'm not the one who's lying here. When it was Madeline's turn to testify, her body trembled with a mix of anger, fear, and anticipation. As she walked to the witness stand, she felt every pair of eyes in the courtroom on her. But she stood tall, her shoulders straight, her chin lifted. The room was quiet as she took the oath, the weight of her words about to shift the course of everything. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she began to speak, but her voice was calm, steady. I've worked hard all my life. I've raised my son, Ethan, after my husband passed away. I've built a life for myself. My apartment is where I've lived for over a decade. Everything I have, my career, my home, my savings, I've earned. She paused, her gaze flickering toward Emily, who sat rigidly, trying to avoid Madeline's eyes. But for months, Emily has been telling me I can't manage on my own. She's been making me feel like I'm too old, too weak, too incapable. Every time I voiced my concerns, she dismissed them. She told me I was paranoid. She even made me feel crazy. Madeline's voice caught for a moment, the weight of the betrayal settling deeper in her chest. She had always thought that family was a safe place. She had trusted Emily, even when the little things started to feel off. The tea, the strange dizziness, the offhand comments about her age, all those moments added up, and now it was clear. Emily had been systematically chipping away at her confidence, trying to wear her down until she was too weak to fight back. She made me believe I was losing my mind, Madeline continued, her voice growing firmer. But when I installed cameras in my apartment, when I started collecting evidence, I found out the truth. She was lying to me. She was trying to take my home, my life. She had planned to sell my apartment without my consent, and she tried to poison me, make me seem mentally unfit. But I wasn't wrong. I wasn't imagining things. She was the one who was manipulating me. The courtroom was still, every eye fixed on her. Madeline could feel the weight of the moment, the full force of her truth breaking through the walls she had built around herself for months. She could hear Emily's lawyer muttering under his breath, preparing for his cross-examination, but for once, Madeline didn't feel the sting of the accusations. Ethan was sitting in the back row, his face pale. Madeline could feel his gaze on her, but she didn't look back. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about her life, her dignity, and taking control of her future. When the cross-examination began, Emily's lawyer tried to twist Madeline's words, questioning her memory, her judgment. You say you were poisoned, but you can't prove that, can you? It's all just speculation, isn't it? Perhaps your dizziness and confusion were just symptoms of aging. Madeline shook her head, a small, bitter smile curving her lips. I don't need to prove it. I have the recordings, the lab results, the witnesses, and most importantly, I have the truth on my side. The tension in the room grew thick as Emily's lawyer tried to discredit her further, but it was too late. Madeline had already laid bare the full extent of Emily's manipulations. Her calm, collected demeanor only strengthened her case. She had been victimized, yes, but she was not weak. She was not a helpless old woman. She was a survivor. When Madeline left the stand, she felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The emotional toll of this trial was overwhelming, but she had done what needed to be done. The truth had come out, and now it was in the hands of the jury. The rest of the trial passed in a blur. Evidence was presented, testimony was given, and in the end, Emily's lies were laid bare for all to see. But as Madeline sat quietly, listening to the final arguments, she couldn't help but feel the full weight of the betrayal. This wasn't just about stolen property or poison. It was about losing trust in someone she had once considered family. And as the jury began deliberating, Madeline realized something else. Ethan's role in this, his silence, his willingness to stand by Emily, was the real heart of the betrayal. He hadn't been an accomplice, but he had allowed it all to happen, and that hurt more than anything. The trial had reached its end, but Madeline knew that, for her, this was just the beginning. The truth had come to light, but the healing, the real journey, would take time. She had won this battle, but the war, she knew, would continue. For now, though, Madeline could breathe a little easier. The fight wasn't over, but she had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life. The courtroom doors creaked open, and the tension in the air felt almost unbearable. Madeline sat in the front row, her hands resting loosely in her lap, but inside her mind was racing. It had been a long, exhausting journey, one filled with moments of heartbreak, disbelief, and betrayal. But now, as the judge read the verdict, everything had come to a head. "Guilty on all counts," the judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, and in that moment, Madeline felt the weight she had carried for months finally start to lift. It was over. Emily's manipulations, her lies, her poison, everything had been exposed for the world to see. And now there would be consequences. Madeline allowed herself a brief exhale, her heart still pounding in her chest. The shock of the verdict was still settling in, but there was also a quiet sense of relief. For the first time in so long, she felt the burden of fear and doubt release its grip on her. As Emily was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her face a mask of disbelief and anger, Madeline didn't flinch. She didn't even look at her. Emily had already lost. It was only a matter of time before the sentencing sealed her fate. Madeline had won. The rest of the trial had been a blur of legal jargon, cross-examinations, and witness statements, but none of it compared to the weight of hearing that single word, guilty. The trial had been a long road, but it had exposed the truth, and the truth, Madeline knew, was her greatest weapon. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind of emotions. The sense of justice was sweet, but it also left Madeline with a deep sense of emptiness. Everything she had built had been threatened, her sense of self undermined, her trust shattered. But now, with the verdict behind her, it was time to start anew. Madeline had spent so many months fighting for her life, literally and emotionally, that she hadn't taken the time to think about what came next. But now, with the trial behind her and Emily behind bars, it was time for Madeline to take back control. She began to slowly rebuild her world, one step at a time. The first thing she did was reclaim her space. Her apartment, once the battlefield of lies and betrayal, became her sanctuary again. She spent days reorganizing, rearranging, and redecorating, each movement a step toward regaining her sense of ownership over her life. Her home was no longer just a place. It was a symbol of her strength, her independence, and her resilience. Madeline also spent more time with her friends, true friends, those who had supported her when the world seemed determined to tear her down. Claire, the friend who had been by her side since the beginning, had been a constant source of strength. They would meet at the cafe, talk about old memories, and laugh as though none of this had ever happened. "Have you ever thought about doing something for yourself?" Claire asked one day, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Something just for fun for you." Madeline smiled. She hadn't thought about that in a long time. "I don't know, maybe I'll take that painting class I've been thinking about, or travel, maybe both." Claire raised an eyebrow, obviously amused. "Why not both? You've earned it." Madeline laughed. "You're right." For the first time in months, Madeline allowed herself to dream. She had spent so many years focusing on others, on her family, her son, her late husband, her work. But now it was time to focus on herself. The hardest part of rebuilding, however, was Ethan. The weight of their fractured relationship was heavy on Madeline's heart. In the aftermath of Emily's arrest, Ethan had been distant, his once warm eyes now clouded with guilt and confusion. He called several times, asking to meet, to talk, but Madeline couldn't bring herself to answer. When they finally sat down, in a small cafe on a rainy afternoon, the conversation was strained. Ethan, looking worn and defeated, tried to explain, but Madeline could already feel the distance between them. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know," he said, his voice low. "I had no idea she would go that far, I just thought." Madeline held up a hand, her heart aching at the sight of him. "You chose her, Ethan. You knew something was wrong, and you chose to turn your back on me. You believed her over me. How could I ever trust you again?" Ethan's face crumpled, his eyes filled with a sadness that Madeline had never seen before. "I was just trying to protect you, to help you. I didn't know how to see it. I didn't know how to help you." Madeline shook her head slowly, tears threatening to fall. "You didn't help me. You hurt me. You let her tear us apart and you didn't even see it. I don't know if I can forgive you for that." The silence between them stretched out, painful and suffocating. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something, but the words failed him. "I need space," Madeline finally said, her voice breaking, though she didn't let the tears fall. "I need to heal, and I can't do that with you hovering over me, expecting me to just move on." Ethan nodded, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his mistakes was too much to bear. "I understand. I just hope. Maybe one day you'll forgive me." Madeline didn't answer. Instead, she stood up, her heart heavy but determined. As she walked away, she felt the finality of it settle over her. Ethan was her son, but the truth was, the betrayal ran deeper than she had ever imagined. She needed to protect herself now, emotionally, mentally, and physically, and that meant letting go of the illusion of a perfect family. Weeks passed, and Madeline slowly began to heal. The pain of losing her son, of the trust she had lost, was still there, but it was no longer consuming her. The decision to cut ties with Ethan had been painful, but it was also freeing. Madeline found solace in her new life, one filled with new opportunities, new adventures, and new beginnings. She traveled, explored the world, took up painting, and rekindled her love of photography. She spent time with her friends, laughed, and for the first time in a long time, she lived. The apartment was hers again. The beach house was hers again. And she was finally, truly hers again. One evening, as she sat on her balcony overlooking the city, Madeline reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The fight had been long and hard, but she had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. She had reclaimed her life. She had set boundaries, and most importantly, she had preserved herself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world, Madeline smiled softly to herself. "I'm finally free."